My child, do not move past this moment too quickly. Something has been unfolding quietly around your story, and what was hidden is beginning to come into the light. Pause here, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at the exact moment when questions have been rising in places you cannot see. Your soulmate has just learned something about the mysterious gray-haired man who has been appearing at the edges of conversations, asking careful questions, watching from a distance, and somehow knowing more about you than anyone expected. Until now, your soulmate did not understand who this man was. They could not understand why your name seemed to matter to him, why his expression changed whenever you were mentioned, or why he kept returning to the same question as if there were something he needed to confirm. But something happened. A truth surfaced. A connection was revealed. And now your soulmate is looking at everything differently. There is a reason your heart may have felt unusually restless lately. There is a reason certain memories have returned without warning, why you may have found yourself thinking about a person, a place, or a moment that seemed long finished. In this fictional spiritual story, heaven is drawing back the curtain on an emotional mystery that has been forming quietly, piece by piece. The gray-haired man was never simply curious. His questions were not random. And the moment your soulmate discovered his real connection to this situation, they went completely still. Not because danger was approaching, but because suddenly details that had never made sense began fitting together in a way that neither of you could have predicted. Your soulmate had heard about him before they ever saw him clearly. At first, it was only a passing mention. Someone said there was an older man who had been asking whether you were doing well. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just a question. Then another. Then another. Your soulmate tried not to think about it. They assumed he might be someone who had known you years ago, perhaps someone connected to a distant chapter of your life, someone who remembered you but had never been important enough to mention. Yet there was something strange about the way people described him. He never asked shallow questions. He did not ask what you owned, what you earned, or what you could offer. He asked about your character. He asked whether you still helped people when nobody noticed. He asked whether you were still the kind of person who remained quiet rather than humiliating someone who had hurt you. He asked whether you had changed after everything you had been through. And that is where your soulmate became uneasy. Not afraid. Curious. Deeply curious. Because those are not the questions of someone searching for gossip. Those are the questions of someone trying to understand the condition of a heart. Your soulmate began wondering how this man could possibly know which questions to ask. How could he know that you had been forced to become stronger? How could he know that there were things you survived without announcing them? How could he know that behind the version of you other people see, there is another version, quieter, deeper, more guarded, yet still capable of extraordinary tenderness? Your soulmate had seen glimpses of that side of you. They had felt it even during moments when you said almost nothing. But hearing a stranger ask about those same hidden qualities unsettled something inside them. Then came the first clue. Someone mentioned that the gray-haired man had known a member of your soulmate's family years ago. Your soulmate immediately asked who. The answer was incomplete. A name was mentioned, but it was a name your soulmate had not heard in a very long time. Suddenly, an old family memory resurfaced. A photograph. A conversation from childhood. A story told around a table and forgotten as the years passed. Your soulmate remembered hearing about a man who once gave advice to someone in their family at a turning point in life. He was described as thoughtful, observant, unusually calm. A man who rarely interfered in other people's choices, but when he spoke, people listened. Could it be the same person? Your soulmate dismissed the possibility at first. Too many years had passed. Too many people could fit that description. But then another detail appeared. The man had asked about you using words almost identical to something your soulmate's family had once said about the kind of person they hoped would someday enter their life. That changed everything. My beloved child, there are moments in every story when coincidence begins to feel too precise to ignore. This became one of those moments. Your soulmates started asking questions of their own. Quietly. Carefully. They did not want anyone to know how deeply this was affecting them. On the outside, they acted almost normal. But inside, something was turning. They needed to know why this man knew your name. They needed to know why he seemed interested in your character. Most of all, they needed to understand why he was asking about you now. Then they learned that he had seen you once before. Not recently. Years ago. And you may not even remember him. That revelation sent a chill of recognition through your soulmate. The gray-haired man had crossed paths with you during a moment when you were not trying to impress anyone. You were not standing on a stage. You were not being celebrated. You were simply being yourself in an ordinary moment that you probably forgot soon afterward. Yet something about what he witnessed stayed with him. Perhaps it was the way you spoke to someone who could do nothing for you. Perhaps it was the way you stepped aside to help when everyone else was too busy. Perhaps it was the way you remained respectful during a situation where you had every reason to become angry. Whatever it was, he remembered. And now, years later, your name appeared again, this time connected to your soulmate. Imagine what that did to him. He recognized the name before anyone realized he recognized it. He did not react immediately. He listened. He watched. He asked another question. And while everyone else thought he was only making conversation, he was quietly trying to determine whether the person being discussed was the same soul he had encountered long ago. Your soulmate did not know this at first. They only knew that this man seemed strangely invested in understanding who you had become. That is when their emotions began changing. At first there had been suspicion. Then curiosity. But now something else appeared, vulnerability. Because your soulmate realized that someone outside the relationship had noticed something valuable in you before they themselves fully understood it. And that realization touched a place inside them they had been trying to avoid. There have been moments when your soulmate questioned you. Moments when they wondered whether your silence meant distance. Moments when they interpreted your caution as lack of feeling. Moments when fear made them look for reasons not to trust what their heart already knew. Yet this older man, someone with no obvious reason to protect your image, was asking questions that pointed toward the exact qualities your soulmate had nearly overlooked. Your patience. Your restraint, your loyalty. Your strange ability to continue caring even after disappointment. Your habit of carrying pain privately because you never wanted your wounds to become weapons against someone else. And suddenly your soulmate had to confront an uncomfortable question. What if they had misunderstood you? That thought would not leave them. It followed them into the quiet hours. It returned when they tried to sleep. It appeared during ordinary moments. And the more they tried to brush it aside, the louder it became. Because sometimes the hardest truth is not discovering that someone deceived you. Sometimes the hardest truth is realizing that someone may have been more sincere than you allowed yourself to believe. The gray-haired man became a mirror. Not intentionally. He did not arrive to accuse anyone. He did not criticize your soulmate. He simply asked questions. But those questions forced your soulmate to examine the story they had created about you. Were you really distant? Or were you protecting something sacred? Were you really uncertain? Or had you been waiting for emotional safety? Were you really difficult to understand? Or had your soulmate been listening through the filter of old wounds? These thoughts began opening doors inside them that had remained closed for a long time. Then the man finally agreed to speak directly with your soulmate. And this is where the story becomes even more unusual. Your soulmate expected explanations. Instead, he began with a question. He asked, "What do you believe about this person?" Your soulmate hesitated. They did not know what answer he wanted. So they gave the safest one. They said you were complicated. The man smiled. Not mockingly. Almost knowingly. Then he asked, complicated, or careful? That one question followed your soulmate like thunder. Because somewhere inside, they knew the difference. A complicated person creates confusion without reason. A careful person has learned that trust should be handled gently. Your soulmate remembered moments when you almost opened up but stopped. Times when you started saying something deeply personal and changed the subject. Times when your eyes seemed to reveal more than your words. Times when you wanted reassurance but refused to demand it. They had once interpreted those moments as emotional distance. Now they saw them differently. The gray-haired man said something else. He told your soulmate that people who have been disappointed deeply sometimes become very careful with hope. They can love strongly while expressing it cautiously. They can want closeness while fearing the cost of believing too quickly. Your soulmate said nothing. Because the words landed too close to the truth. Then came another revelation. The man explained how he first remembered you. Years earlier, he had been going through one of the hardest periods of his own life. He carried a private burden nobody around him fully understood. During that season, he witnessed you do something small. So small that you would never think it mattered. But to him, it mattered greatly. You showed kindness when you were under no obligation to do so. You treated someone with dignity when others had overlooked them. And in that brief moment, something about your behavior restored a little of his faith in people. You never knew. You continued with your life. But he remembered your face. He remembered your manner. And most importantly, he remembered the feeling. That is why your name caught his attention years later. That is why he started asking questions. Not because he wanted something from you. Because he wanted to know whether life had preserved that goodness in you. Your soulmate's entire expression changed when they heard this. Because suddenly this was not about a mysterious man at all. It was about you. It was about the invisible impact you have made in moments you assumed nobody noticed. It was about the strange possibility that one forgotten act of goodness had traveled through years and returned at precisely the moment your soulmate needed a reason to see you more clearly. My beloved child, do you understand why this matters? So much of what shapes your future happens in moments you do not recognize as important. A word. A choice. A kindness. A refusal to become cruel when cruelty would have been easier. You rarely know where those moments travel. You rarely know who remembers them. You rarely know when they will return. The gray-haired man had become evidence of something your soulmate could no longer dismiss. Your character had left fingerprints on lives you did not even know you had touched. And now one of those fingerprints had found its way back to them. But there was still another question. Why now? Why was he asking about you at this exact time? Your soulmate asked him directly. The man grew quiet. And his silence immediately made the atmosphere feel different. He looked away for several seconds, as if deciding how much he should reveal. Then he told your soulmate that he had recently heard their family discussing an important change. A decision. A crossroads. Something involving the future. Your soulmate's heart began pounding. Because they knew exactly what he meant. There had been conversations. Private ones. Conversations about where life was going. About relationships. About commitment. About whether certain doors should remain open or finally close. Your soulmate had not realized the older man knew anything about these conversations. But he did. Not every detail. Enough. And when he heard your name connected to that decision, he remembered you. That is when his curiosity became concern, not concern because he believed something bad was happening, but concern because he believed your soulmate might make an important choice without understanding the full character of the person standing on the other side of it. You. He did not want to decide for them. He did not want to interfere. But he wanted them to ask themselves one question before choosing. Have you judged this person by their quietness instead of their actions? Your soulmate felt that question somewhere deeper than words. Because actions. That is where the truth had always been hiding. Not in dramatic declarations. Not in perfect timing. Not in constant reassurance. Actions. The times you remained. The times you tried. The times you gave space instead of pressure. The times you protected their dignity even when you were confused. The times you did not expose private matters simply to prove you had been hurt. The times you could have retaliated but chose restraint. The times you continued wishing them well even while your own heart was tired. Your soulmate began remembering all of it. And the memories came faster than they could control. One after another. Small details. tiny moments. Things they had dismissed. Now everything looked different. The older man's questions were rearranging the past. Not changing what happened. Changing how it was understood. That can be one of the most powerful shifts a heart ever experiences. Because when understanding changes, emotions often follow. Your soulmate returned home carrying a storm inside them. They did not tell anyone what the man had said. They needed silence. They needed space. They needed to sit alone with the possibility that they had been looking at you through an incomplete story. That night they opened old messages. Not necessarily every message. Just enough. They reread certain conversations. They noticed pauses they once misunderstood. They noticed tenderness hidden beneath simple words. They noticed places where you had been trying to explain yourself but gave up when you sensed they were not ready to hear it. And then they found one message that stopped them completely. It was something you had written casually. A sentence that seemed ordinary at the time. But after speaking with the gray-haired man, the meaning changed. Your words suddenly sounded less like distance and more like protection. Less like avoidance and more like someone trying not to force love. Your soulmate placed the phone down. Then picked it up again. They read the sentence one more time. And that is when emotion rose. Not dramatic panic. Recognition. The kind that arrives when the heart finally understands something the mind has been resisting. They whispered your name. Quietly. Almost as if saying it too loudly would break the moment. Then they asked themselves another question. What if I knew who they were all along, and I was simply too afraid to trust it? My beloved child, fear can disguise itself as logic. It can sound reasonable. It can build arguments. It can call itself caution. Sometimes caution is wise. But sometimes fear uses caution as a hiding place. Your soulmate is beginning to see where that happened. And the gray-haired man, without trying to control anything, has become the unexpected catalyst. But this is not where the mystery ends. Because there was one thing he did not tell your soulmate during that conversation. Something he kept to himself. Something he only revealed later to another person connected to the family. And when your soulmate eventually heard about it, the entire situation shifted again. The man had not only met you once. There had been a second connection. A deeper one. Something he remembered after seeing a photograph. Yes. A photograph. Someone showed him your picture while discussing the situation. He looked at it longer than expected. Then he leaned closer. His expression changed. And he said a sentence nobody in the room understood. I knew there was something familiar. They asked what he meant. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked where the photograph was taken. Then he asked approximately when. Then he asked who else had been there. The room grew quiet. Because suddenly it seemed as if he was not looking at the photograph. He was looking through it. Into a memory. A memory nobody else knew existed. Later, Your soulmate learned that the gray-haired man had once attended an event connected to that exact place. Not the same day. Years apart. But the location mattered. Because that location was tied to someone from his past. Someone he respected deeply. Someone who had once told him that certain people enter your story quietly before their purpose becomes clear. Your soulmate thought this was strange enough. But then came the detail that made their heart stop. The person from his past had spoken about someone with your exact first name. Not necessarily you. At least, that is what everyone assumed. A common coincidence. Nothing more. But the gray-haired man was no longer convinced. He began searching his memory. Dates. Places. Conversations. Then he remembered a letter. An old letter. One he had stored away for years. The letter was not about romance. It was about gratitude. About a family. About a kindness shown during a difficult season. And somewhere inside that letter was a reference to someone who might have been connected to your family. Your soulmate heard this and felt the air leave the room. Now the story stretched further back than anyone expected. Long before your soulmate knew you. Long before either of you imagined your paths could cross. There may have already been a quiet thread connecting your worlds. Not magic. Not destiny that removes free choice. A human thread. Kindness moving through generations. Names crossing stories. People remembering people. Lives touching indirectly before meeting directly. And that possibility changed your soulmate even more. Because suddenly you were no longer a random chapter in their life. You were part of a pattern they had never noticed. Your soulmate asked the man to find the letter. He agreed. But when he went looking for it, it was not where he remembered leaving it. That created another mystery. For years it had been stored among old documents, now it was missing. Your soulmate thought perhaps it had been thrown away. The man disagreed. He remembered seeing it recently. Someone else had moved it. The question was who? And why? The next day, he contacted a relative. The relative knew exactly which letter he meant. They had seen it. More than that, they had read part of it. And one line had stood out. A line about a child who had once shown unusual compassion during a family difficulty. Your soulmate immediately asked for the name. The relative hesitated. Not because they were hiding it. Because they could not remember the full name. Only an initial. The same initial as yours. Now your soulmate's rational mind fought against the emotional weight of what they were hearing. It could still be coincidence. Of course it could. Stories overlap. Names repeat. Memories blur. The gray-haired man himself admitted that. He refused to make grand claims. And strangely, that made your soulmate trust him more. He was not trying to turn coincidence into prophecy. He was simply following a thread. A thread that somehow kept returning to you. Then your soulmate asked the question they had been afraid to ask from the beginning. Why does this matter to you so much? The man became very still. His eyes softened. And for the first time, your soulmate saw something almost paternal in his expression. Not because he was claiming any role in your life. Because the question touched something personal inside him. He explained that years ago, during one of his darkest seasons, someone had told him never to ignore the people who quietly restore hope. He had carried those words ever since. When he remembered you, he remembered that promise. He said, "Sometimes we meet someone for 1 minute, and they remind us what goodness looks like. We should not forget that." Your soulmate felt emotion rising again. Because this man had not been asking about you to investigate you. He had been asking because he remembered you kindly. And now he wanted to know whether the person he once remembered had become the person standing near your soulmate's future. That knowledge touched something your soulmate had been starving for. Perspective. They had been so trapped inside their own fears that they had forgotten to ask how other people experienced you. Now they were hearing an answer they never expected. You had been remembered. Not for perfection. Not for appearance. Not for status. For goodness. And goodness has a way of becoming visible over time. My beloved child, this is where something began changing inside your soulmate that they have not yet fully admitted. Their resistance softened. Their curiosity became tenderness. Their tenderness became regret. Not destructive regret. The kind that makes someone want to do better. They began seeing how many assumptions they had made. How often they interpreted your pauses without asking what they meant. How often they protected themselves before giving you the chance to be understood. And somewhere between those realizations, another feeling emerged. Hope. Quiet at first. Fragile. But alive. They began wondering whether the story between you had been judged too early. Whether there were still things left unsaid. Whether both of you had been carrying incomplete versions of the same truth. And then your soulmate did something they had been avoiding. They asked the gray-haired man what he thought they should do. He refused to decide for them. Instead, he said something simple. Do not choose from fear. That sentence entered the room like light. Your soulmate looked down. Because they knew. They knew fear had influenced more than they wanted to admit. Fear of disappointment. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of loving someone deeply and still not knowing how the story would end. The man continued. He told them that no relationship should be built on fantasy. No decision should be made only because something feels mysterious or meaningful. People still need honesty. Conversation. Consistency. Real choices. But he also said that fear should not be allowed to rewrite someone's character without evidence. Your soulmate knew exactly who he was talking about. You. That night, something shifted. Your soulmate stopped asking, "What if I get hurt?" And for the first time in a long while, they asked, "What if I have misunderstood someone who genuinely cared?" That question has power. Because it does not guarantee an ending. It opens a door to truth. And truth is exactly what this story is moving toward. But there is more. The missing letter was found. Not by the gray-haired man. By someone else. It had been placed inside an old book. When they opened it, the paper was fragile, the ink faded in places, but most of the words were still readable. The gray-haired man read it first. His hands trembled slightly. Then he called your soulmate. He did not explain everything over the phone. He only said, "You need to see this for yourself." Your soulmate went to him carrying a mixture of skepticism and hope. The letter was placed on the table. Your soulmate began reading. The first paragraph seemed unrelated. It described a difficult time. A family struggling through uncertainty. A person who helped unexpectedly. Then came the middle of the letter. A name appeared. Not yours. Someone older. Someone connected. Your soulmate did not recognize it. The gray-haired man did. He explained the relationship. And suddenly the room felt smaller. Because the name belonged to someone who had once known a member of your family. Not closely. But enough. Enough for your worlds to have brushed against each other long before you and your soulmate ever met. Your soulmate kept reading. Then they reached the final paragraph. And there it was. A reference to a younger person. A child at the time. Someone who had done something thoughtful. No full name. Only a nickname. Your soulmate stared at the nickname. They had heard it before. From you. Once. Long ago. You had mentioned that someone used to call you that when you were young. Your soulmate's hands went cold. They looked at the gray-haired man. He looked back. Neither spoke. Because suddenly the possibility of coincidence felt much smaller. Your soulmate read the line again. The letter described a moment of kindness. A small act. A child offering comfort to an adult who was quietly struggling. You may not remember it. Children often do things from the heart and forget them. Adults remember. The gray-haired man remembered. And now your soulmate understood. He had not simply encountered you once. He had heard about you years before that. Your story had crossed his life twice. Once through someone else's words. Once through his own eyes. And now a third time through your soulmate. 3 separate moments. 3 separate chapters. One person. You. That realization overwhelmed your soulmate. Not because it proved some supernatural conclusion. Because it revealed something beautifully human. Your character had traveled farther than you knew. Your kindness had echoes. Your presence had been remembered in places you never thought to look. And perhaps the most emotional part was this: your soulmate had spent so much time questioning whether you truly cared, while people from chapters you had forgotten were still remembering the ways you once cared for them. Something broke open inside your soulmate. They finally understood why the gray-haired man had been asking about you. He wanted to know whether life had hardened you. Whether disappointment had changed your heart. Whether the person he remembered still existed. And from everything he had heard, his conclusion was simple. You had changed. Of course you had. You had become wiser. More guarded. More careful. But the heart underneath had not disappeared. Your soulmate heard this and lowered their eyes. Because suddenly they remembered every time they mistook your boundaries for coldness. Every time they called your patience indifference. Every time they assumed your silence meant you did not care. And one realization became impossible to escape. You may not have been withholding love. You may have been protecting it. The gray-haired man said nothing for a while. He let your soulmate sit with the truth. Then he reached for the letter again. There was one final part. A folded section nobody had noticed. The paper had been creased inward. The gray-haired man carefully opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. Different ink. Different handwriting. Added later. He read the first sentence silently. Then stopped. His face changed. Your soulmate immediately noticed. What does it say? He did not answer. He read the note again. Slowly. Then looked toward the window. Your soulmate asked once more. This time his voice was quieter. There is something here about your family. Your soulmate leaned forward. What? The man hesitated. And for the first time since all of this began, he looked uncertain whether the next truth should be spoken immediately. Because the note contained a name. A name your soulmate knew very well. Someone close. Someone whose opinion had influenced their choices for years. Someone who had never once admitted knowing anything about you. Yet according to that faded handwritten note, this person may have known about your family long before your soulmate ever met you. And beneath that name were 7 words that made the gray-haired man close the letter, look directly into your soulmate's eyes, and say, before I tell you what this means, there is something else you need to know.